Everyone, welcome to the live Q&A. I'm Derrick, Chiefs Digest, and yes, 7:07. So if Brandon's here tonight, I got closer to the 7:13 time, but I apologize. I know I was talking to someone yesterday about my penchant for not being on time, and I'm trying to do better. I was doing better, and then I show up at 7:07 because I stopped to eat some cheese quesadillas. If you need to just know the insight into how my life and my mind and my day works and everything. So, obviously tonight, there's a couple of, Chiefs news things going around. One, if you haven't seen it, the Athletic has some details about Isaiah Buggs' arrest, at least some details from the police report that does not make it sound very good in Isaiah's. It's an ugly report. And involving the domestic violence charges against him. Nothing yet from the Chiefs. There could be something from the Chiefs here certainly soon about Isaiah Buggs. Obviously, normally the Chiefs let things like this get vetted and, wait to get their own information. See what's happening in the case. Complicated with this is that we are right now in the time zone where pretty much everybody in the organization is, generally on vacation. I mean, they're off. So sometimes things are just a little bit back burner, and sometimes even like just routine transactions might not get made. So not saying that's anything about Isaiah, about which way the Chiefs are going to go, but it is an ugly report. Doesn't mean that it's true, but it's not a good look for Isaiah. Hopefully it's not true. Hopefully everybody in the case is safe, but it's obviously worth paying attention to and seeing how that story develops. Obviously, a big story today is the Kansas legislature has approved the Star Bond proposal for building stadiums for the Chiefs and the Royals and for funding them. This is just the first step in a very, very long process. I mean, it doesn't mean that the Chiefs and the Royals are moving automatically. I mean, I can only speak from the Chiefs side of things as far as closely as I'm covering them. There's still a lot of details. I mean, this is just the funding mechanism that Kansas has approved. There's still a lot of details to be negotiated. The Chiefs put out a statement in which they basically acknowledge that they welcome the passage of the Star Bond proposal, and they look forward to entering into negotiations about how they move forward. There obviously needs to be development agreements, locations, all of these things chosen. There's a lot of details, that need to be hammered out as far as, if the Chiefs do move to Kansas, where the stadium is going to go. Where will a practice facility be? Will they stay and have any aspect of that stay in Missouri? Will their headquarters be in one location and training facility in another? Training camp, where will it be? Will it stay in Missouri? There's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts, and some of these may be years in development. I mean, we'll see how quickly they get a development deal done with Kansas, if there is one done. We will see how Kansas City, Missouri, Jackson County, and the state of Missouri responds. Just Jackson County Executive Frank White issued a statement, making this another, accusing Kansas of restarting the border war that had a bit of an economic truce between the two sides of trying to steal businesses across the state line. Quentin Lucas, mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, said the same thing, but says that they're in the first quarter of negotiations, is how he put it. As far as trying to retain the Royals and the Chiefs. So Kansas City, Missouri, Jackson County, Missouri haven't given up, but I still stand by what I've said over the last couple of months, that Missouri is behind the eight ball, that without having sports gambling and sports betting legalized in Missouri, which is going to be a key component of both of these stadiums, most likely. I know it will absolutely be a key component of the Chiefs. They already have a sports betting partner in place that's part of their sponsors. They're ready to incorporate, Mark Donovan's talked in depth about, the future and the stadiums having betting kiosks and all of these things. I mean, sports books, possibly inside stadiums. That's the future. So Missouri not having that in place is a huge detriment to their success right now and ability to keep these two teams. They obviously have no funding mechanism in place. There have been no negotiations. So right now, if there's a border war, I mean, Kansas is winning it. Missouri's losing it pretty hard. I don't know if it's the first quarter or not, like Mayor Lucas said, but there's a lot to be discussed. Sorry about that. It was a Freudian slip. I promise. Wasn't a Freudian slip. I suppose I should say. I wasn't trying to say it was disgusting. I probably should drink more tea, apparently. But I don't know how much you all are interested in that. If you want to get into the issues involving, Kansas, I mean, that is a long-term discussion. I mean, this isn't going to be a quick resolution. I mean, the Chiefs are committed to Arrowhead through the 2030 season. So first time they would be playing in Kansas would be 2031. It's 7 years away. So there's a lot of things to be done between now and then. There's a lot of things going on at Arrowhead between now and then, a lot of things involving this team. So I'm going to leave it up to you how much you want to talk about everything with your questions. I know there's quite a few. Nanos Mango has quite a discussion there about some things that Dave Tobe said today. So let's get into that. And Luttrell, I just wanted to thank you for the kind words there. We Nick and I can ramble sometimes. Me much more than Nick, but we can ramble. But I appreciate that you are grateful for that. Nanos Mango, what do you make of Dave Tobe's comments today about Nico Remigio? And I think you also threw it in here. He's probably our number one kick returner right now, so he's got a real good shot in my book to make this team. He's doing everything he can as a wide receiver. Tobe made it sound like both LRZ, Louis Reese-Zammit, and Remigio make this team. Do you see a world in which that happens? Yeah, I mean, I do. And I'll bring that quote up so you can see it a little bit more there, Mango, that you referenced there. This kind of echoes a little bit about what Dave told us when he spoke to us, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, and what we're kind of seeing. I mean, the Chiefs would have right now. I mean, they're going to have two returners on the field. I expected if they played the game tomorrow that LRZ and Remigio would be their top two returners. So yeah, I mean, they both have a good shot to make this team. Absolutely. And Remigio is absolutely making his case as a receiver. So, and now how much of that is Dave Tobe touting up his guys that he wants to make the team? I mean, there's part of that there. I'm not saying it's absolutely not true though. I mean, Remigio has been a great player. I mean, right now, and I'm working on my first roster projection right now. It's going to be up later this week. I have Remigio probably making this team. I mean, I have a hard time not having him on this team right now, with as well as he's played during the offseason. There's a lot of steps still to go, but yeah, I mean, I think that's an accurate statement from Dave Tobe. What does it mean for, Louis Reese-Zammit? I mean, could they both make this team? Yeah. I don't believe that one is mutually exclusive of the other. I mean, if Remigio makes this team, does that mean that the Louis Reese-Zammit's not making as a running back? No. And vice versa. I mean, I think they both could make this team. One of them could make this team. Both of them could not make this team. I mean, there's still a lot to go. As Nick likes to say, when the pads come on, we'll get a true definition for both those guys and really what they are. But I think what you've quoted there with Tobe is very accurate. And, you also said, Tobe said the wide receiver 6 battle would come down between McCole and Nico. Do you think it's possible Remigio wins and McCole ends up on the practice squad? I mean, anything's possible, Mango. I mean, it really is. There's quite a few different scenarios in that case. And, I mean, once again, I mean, are the Chiefs going to keep 5? They're going to keep 6? Or going to keep 7 receivers again like they did last year? I think that outside the top 4, once again, barring injuries, and my 4 are Hollywood, Rasheed, Watson, and Worthy. Those 4 are all healthy. They're making the team. And then it's, hey, do you keep 5, 6, or 7? Right now, I have a hard time not putting in Nico and penciling him at probably the number 5 receiver. I mean, I think he's earned that spot. McCole hasn't been around long enough to really get a good gauge about where he is on the kind of depth chart right now. But I think, him, Sky, obviously, Kadarius is in that conversation. I mean, even Cornell Powell is in that conversation. There's a group of receivers who were in that conversation for those 5, 6, and 7 spots. So, I mean, there's a lot to be decided, a lot that can still go on. But I've seen nothing at this point to refute what Dave Tobe said. So I think that's pretty accurate. So I have no problems with I mean, quoting that, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't I wouldn't turn my nose up at it and say it's not true or anything like that. I mean, Dave Tope usually shoots you straight. Sometimes he is going to pump up his guys that he wants to make the team, but Tobe, you can usually take what he takes to the bank, and I would say what he said about both those guys is pretty accurate. Des the Gem member, any updates on the Creed or Nick Bolton extensions? Nothing that I've heard, as it still seems fairly quiet on that front. I haven't expected a whole lot of updates this time of year, just because, if anything gets done with players, especially with the Chiefs, it usually gets a little bit closer to the training camp and the beginning of the season. So my next kind of window, it doesn't mean that something couldn't get done between now and say July, 4th or something of that nature. I mean, this is, like I mentioned at the top of the show, this is the time of year when a lot of the players, a lot of the personnel, front offices all go on vacation. So sometimes a lot of movement doesn't happen this time of year, but I would be very intrigued to see what happens during training camp, if there is, some movement there. Start of the season is obviously another deadline. That's when, if things usually get done, it's usually before the season starts. The Chiefs have gotten some extensions done in the past at the very beginning of training camp. So that's why that's one window for me. The beginning of the season is a second window. Once the season starts, I mean, players are usually in the mindset that they're going to bet on themselves. And I would put both those guys probably in that category. So my gut at least tells me that if you want to see an extension done with either or both of those guys, that's the self-imposed deadline. That's the one you're circling as the beginning of the season. That there's some movement and there's agreement for one of those guys in place by September 5th. That's I think your spot. So we'll see what happens. But no, I haven't seen any movement right now on anyone, and I'll throw Trey Smith in there as well. I mean, I haven't heard or seen any movement as far as negotiations on either of those fronts, any of those fronts. Dr. Ozzy, Frank White feigning shock that Kansas would go after the teams after tanking multiple deals and urging no votes. Hilarious. I mean, I have to say I've never really understood Frank's position on a lot of the things. I mean, I guess he's made it fairly clear in that. I mean, I'm not sure fairly. I mean, I think I could best characterize his statement is that he has thought that it is too early to make any decisions about the leases and long term, because they still have 7 years. But I mean, it takes a while to build a stadium, and I mean, I don't think there's any reason why that the teams shouldn't be talking about it right now. I mean, and certainly you got other parties who are interested. And once the vote went down, and I know Frank was not a proponent of the vote, he was against the sales tax, that proposal as it was put forward. So can't pin him to that, but I also haven't seen a counter proposal from Frank White. And that's the problem, is that you are, at this point, you're in a window where you need to have a counter proposal. So I guess we are in that just ballpark that we're gonna get this, get the border war back as far as these two states. Maybe are a lot of arguing back and forth. And I just don't know what Missouri has in its proposals to do anything. I mean, that right now they have zero on the table, and I just don't know what's going to happen. I think that both these teams, I shouldn't say that. I'll say I think that my gut tells me that the Royals, and this is just as a fan and as an observer from the outside, I think the Royals seem much more interested in staying in Missouri as a possibility. I think that the Chiefs are obviously a little bit more interested in moving to Kansas. I think there's certainly more opportunities for them, and the grass is definitely greener on the other side of the state line right now for them. I think it's much easier for Kansas to lure the Chiefs, and they can offer them a lot more. So we'll see what happens. But Brenda, hello. It's good to see you. Appreciate you coming in tonight. Mango, if Hollywood, Rasheed, Xavier, and Jay Water roster locks and Remigio was wanted by both Nagy and Tobe, who's more likely to get the final spot, Tony, Moore, or Hardman? And that's, once again, I mean, what is the final spot? Is it 6 or 7? It's hard to tell for me for a little reason here, Mango, and this is why, because Sky's the only one who's been there, throughout the offseason workouts. Kadarius obviously wasn't there for the optional part of the voluntary part of OTAs. He was only there for the mini camp. and we only saw 2 practices. McCole came in at the very end, I guess. I think he was there for maybe the final couple of practices of OTA, so he wasn't there for the entire time. So being able to identify kind of where they are as far as the rotation goes, I think is really hard. I mean, I would say and will say that when I start putting my roster projection together, my order of those right now would be Sky, Hardman, Toney, but that's not firm in any way whatsoever. I mean, it can change a lot. I think it will change a lot once we get to training camp. I mean, they're going to continue to, and once again, I mean, the other guys are going to get their chances with the first team. So there will be some opportunities. Everybody's going to get a chance. And it's going to be what they make of those opportunities. Either any one of those players could break out and, take over one of those roles and push one. One of them could easily be pushing Remigio too. So you never know what's going to happen, especially when the pads come on. So, I mean, that's how I would see it right now. And like I say, I mean, I would still have Jay Watson at 90%. I do think that he's just that likely. Seeing the Chiefs walk away from him, I think there would have to be an injury of some sort or development. I think he's just too, at least consistent. I mean, he has a ceiling, but I think that the Chiefs are very comfortable with him and being able to put him into the lineup. So that's why I think, Watson has a really good chance to make it with this team. But yeah, I would have Remigio, and my order of those 3 right now, it would be Sky, Hardman, Toney. That's just mainly based on 2 practices though. And that's not anywhere close to a large enough sample size. So we will find out a lot about this team. It's less than a month away now, because I know the first practice is the open practice, I guess, for the public is July 21st, but July 16th is the day that the rookies and quarterbacks report for the mini camp and some of the injured players. So we're going to get to see this team for the first private practice for that rookie mini camp on July 17th. So we're literally less than a month away from the true beginning of training camp. Gary, good to see you in there as well. Ozzy, is Worthy still projected #1 punt returner? Really hard to tell, Oz, because we haven't seen him. We haven't seen him in an open practice at all. So where he is at on the punt return, I couldn't even begin to tell you. There's a lot of players who are going to be in that discussion. I mean, we've seen quite a few players go through the rotation of that punt returner role. I do know that the Chiefs, when they drafted when they drafted Xavier Worthy that night, the intention was that, yeah, he's probably going to be their punt returner. So whether the hamstring injury affects that somewhat, they want to make sure that he stays healthy. We'll find out. But for me, I have not seen him take a rep, and unless he took a rep in that first practice, that they had, there was that first practice, close practice of OTAs before he tweaked the hamstring. Hardly anybody's seen him take a rep at a punt return spot. So I couldn't even begin to tell you yet, Oz. We'll see. Pano, how Sky gets picked over Remigio would be mind-boggling. Right now, I think it would be hard to say. Yeah, I mean, Remigio, based on the reps, based on performance, I would absolutely say, and obviously based on the feedback of the coaches that we've been getting, I would agree. I mean, Remigio would be ahead of him right now. But we also haven't seen Remigio through a full training camp. I mean, I know he got to play a little bit last year. I think he played in the first preseason game before he got hurt. He was holding up through the pads before the shoulder separation. But you need to see what happens. So I don't know. I mean, you kind of know what Sky is. I mean, is he going to make a big leap? I've said it before. There can be players, and there are players who can make a leap in year 3. Does it happen a lot when players have had, the seasons that Sky has had in year 1 and year 2 that look very, very similar? Usually you see some progression. So I'm not ruling it out. I mean, and Sky, I think, has looked, decent during OTA. So he's put up some good work. Has it been as good as Remigio? Not at least in the practices that I've been at, not in the ones that were open to us. So Chiefs have had more closed practices than open practices to the media at this point. So once again, our sample size is impacted a little bit there. But yeah, I would have Remigio over Sky right now, but it's not a landslide. I mean, Sky could certainly make it up, especially if Remigio were to struggle, going into training camp at some point. If Sky's able to stay consistent, prove that he can hold on to the football. I mean, there's a lot of things that he can do to still make this team. And Sky, I think, is probably a little bit more versatile. I mean, I think, even though Remigio to me looks a little bit thicker than he did before, Sky is probably maybe still a little bit more, maybe special teams wise, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think Remigio is going to be on a cover team. I mean, he could be a gunner. I think would be okay for that. Sky, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, Remigio as a kick returner, yes, that's absolutely something that Tobe really seems to like him for. So I can see that. Other special teams roles, I think I'd probably give the edge to Sky. Punt return, Sky, I know that's a mixed bag right there. I haven't seen a ton of Nico as a punt returner, so that's something I would need to see more of. But probably gets a little bit more dicey when you're just talking about, all phases of special teams with those two players. But I would still give the edge to Remigio. But it's just going to say, once again, when you get into the late July and early August and you can hit and you got pads on, what do these players look like? And that's going to be the question. So KL368, another member. Great to see you. Appreciate you again, and all of the members on our YouTube channel. I've seen a lot of hype around Najee Johnson, and it seems to stem from a really limited training camp last year. Is he ahead of Watson or Williams? It's a great question because, again, I mean, you're right. It is a limited sample size. We haven't seen a lot of Najee. He really didn't get onto the field to start working with the, full team, until the mandatory minicamp during OTAs, the start of them. He was only out there for position drills. By the very end, he was starting to move up so that he was getting a little bit of scout team looks, but wasn't involved in, 11 on 11 and that kind of thing until they got to the mandatory minicamp, and then you kind of saw him moving up a little bit. Based on what I've seen right now, I mean, and based on the reps and based on the work, the other factor that's kind of making it difficult to judge is that Watson's been dinged up. He's also had a muscle injury that the Chiefs have limited his work a little bit. So where he stands is also a little questionable. So I'd have no problems right now saying Joshua Williams is near the top of that depth chart. I mean, at the cornerback spot, you'd have Trent McDuffie, you'd have Joshua Williams. I would probably say Najee Johnson and then Jalen Watson, but that's just purely based on what we saw during the mandatory minicamp, the veteran minicamp. We haven't seen enough from Watson yet, and I have no reason to believe that injury is serious. Again, it looks just like a soft tissue-ish. It's a soft tissue injury that you're just cautious with this time of year because there's no reason to risk it. But I don't think there's any doubt, and from the Chiefs and what we've seen, and at least the indications are that Joshua Williams has been making the leap that the Chiefs kind of were hoping for and expecting. I mean, Jalen Watson came in and was, I think, in the Chiefs' mind, the better player. Last year, it started to change, that they felt like Josh was starting to move ahead of Jalen a little bit. Now I think that there's at least a perception that he's probably a little bit further ahead of Jalen now. Question is, Najee, what percentage of healthy is he from the ACL last year? And yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit of his earning some time right now and earning some opportunities is his performance last year, because he was on track to be a starter, one of the starters on this team a year ago before the ACL injury. So I think he's going to get those opportunities. It's, hey, during training camp, can he make the most of them? So the hype, I don't think around Najee, I don't really think it's all media hype. I truly think it's this team ready to give him the work, because once he was a full go, once they were ready to get him out there with the, full team workout, it was not a, working his way back situation. I mean, he was getting back close to the spot he was on the depth chart last year. And that to me tells me that this team is serious about, seeing where he's at, and that putting him in that competition for at least the number 3 corner spot, if not number 2. So I think it's legit talk. A question is just going to be, how healthy is he? How close to 100% is Najee? How does Jalen look once they get to training camp and he's got this injury behind him and can be a full go? but I think it's going to be a deep corner group. I think that's going to be a good competition because, frankly, if you've got those guys that you're talking about as your 2, 3, and 4 corners, I mean, there's a lot of teams in the league that I think would love to have one of those guys as their number 3 corner, much less their number 4 corner. I mean, I think that's a good group. So let's see here. James, good to see you. Kathy, any more talk about the adding more spots to the 53-man roster? I wish. That's going to be a collective bargaining issue, and I think it should be tied to adding an 18th game. So we'll see what happens, Kathy. But you know me, I'm a proponent for it. So let's see. Cody, both organizations brought a subpar deal for the Jackson County vote. I don't disagree either with that. I mean, I had issues with both the Royals and the Chiefs proposals that were for the Jackson County vote. I wasn't a Jackson County voter. I was covering it, so I didn't, I tried not to say anything about it beforehand because I'm trying to cover it and be objective. But if I was a Jackson County voter, I'm still not sure what I would have done, honestly, Cody. I mean, I think I probably would have been against it because I don't think it was the best deal possible. And seeing, the renderings that we saw in April, which I think there's a lot more legitimacy to than some other people. I'm not saying that's how the new stadium in Kansas is going to look. I'm just saying that I think there's more legitimacy to them than has been maybe accredited to them. I think it's a little bit more of a real picture about what could be a stadium. I mean, it's very early. I mean, I talked about at the very beginning of the discussion tonight. There's a lot of pieces in place, but those renderings are a legitimate starting point. And those renderings for a new Arrowhead were a lot more creative than the reimagined Arrowhead. So and the issues that the Royals had with the location of the stadium and the street, traffic flow, all of those things that they just didn't seem to have really solid answers for, and just seemed to be like, don't worry about it, vote for this and we'll figure it out later, was a bad answer. So yeah, I mean, I think that it was a subpar deal, and for the teams, it was a decent deal. Although I'll be honest, I think the teams are getting a better deal from Kansas than they would have gotten from that sales tax, at least as far as the money that's going into them. And the Chiefs, getting a brand new stadium, the Dome Stadium versus a refurbished Arrowhead. I mean, I do think that's a better deal. Hey, Brandon, I do appreciate the question. I talked a little bit about at the top of the show. Obviously, I mentioned the story that's in The Athletic today as well about the details of the second arrest. We'll see what they do. I mean, I think the Chiefs will obviously, do their due diligence on this to see what it is. It is a very ugly story, though. It's very concerning. So nothing would surprise me at this point. I'm sure that the Chiefs are going to be giving it a pretty close, hard look. Like I said, it may bring somebody off their vacation to look at it and see what they need to do. But it is a very disappointing story involving Isaiah. Very, very frustrating. He was at the ring ceremony on Thursday, and then this arrest happened, 2 nights later. So the Chiefs don't need that kind of drama. That's for sure. So if there is a move, it wouldn't surprise me. Pano, I'm seriously concerned about Werther's frailty. Very concerning. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, Pano, one of the reasons why I'm not is that, the Chiefs with their due diligence on Worthy, toughness was a factor. I mean, it was not just hey, we're drafting this guy because, the people down in Texas tell us that he's tough and don't worry about anything. I mean, the people in Texas were telling the Chiefs that Xavier Worthy is one of the toughest guys on the team and not to worry about that. I mean, I know he had the ankle injury, in the Big 12 championship game, and that affected him in the postseason, in the bowl game as well. But look at what he did at the combine. I mean, he was perfectly healthy there. So that was not a serious injury of any sort. So I don't have a lot of concern about that. Now that said, from all along, even before the NFL draft, one of the things I said was that I was just concerned about his size and whether that frame was going to stand up to a full NFL season. So I do appreciate that. I mean, and And so I guess I'm not a one side panel. I'm not going to tell anybody not to worry about it. I think, to me, I'm probably less worried about it. And I think I said this before. I'm less worried about Worthy's potential frailty or being injury prone of anything of that nature than I was in March for two reasons. And one is that I'm going to say three reasons. I'm going to expand it to three. One is that, his 165 that he was at the combine was really fuel to try and get the 40 record. 175 is probably closer to his seasonal playing weight. I feel a lot more comfortable about that. I still think he's a pretty thin frame, but at 175, that's a whole lot different than 165. It's a difference. It may not seem like a huge difference, but when you look at receivers of that weight class, like 168 to 170 is a big dividing line. I'd be really concerned about him at 165. I'm not as concerned about 175. So two, is once again, it's the what you heard from the coaches in Texas about his toughness, that, he did play through things. Frailty for one thing. Players are going to be hurt all the time. It's your ability and your willingness to play through injury sometimes that really makes you stand out. And it sounds like Worthy's one of those guys that you just got to drag him off the field, I'm sure. And looking at him, I'll tell you this. Watching him, you could see he was a little stir crazy during OTAs and minicamp, that he wanted to be out there. So I think that it was really hard for him in that situation, just reading his body language. I think he wanted to be out there, and sometimes you don't always see that with a player. So that's a good sign for me. But three, the final thing is that, the Chiefs talking about him playing an even bigger weight, that, that they think he can handle 185. Now you're getting close to, Tyreek range as far as bulk. And obviously Tyreek was able to play at that weight, still maintain the speed, without losing a ton of his speed. And, it made him more durable. So yeah, I feel like at that spot, for sure, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with Worthy with just having a little bit more bulk and everything. So I'm not as concerned as I was a couple of months ago. I can see why you can be concerned, but I wouldn't be worried about this hamstring, because it's one of those things that does happen. So players get them. Jalen Watson's dealing with the same thing. Leo Chenal, I think, has had this kind of same thing pop up, and the Chiefs have just been very cautious with everybody across the board during this offseason program, just making sure they're ready for camp and 100%. Rob, thank you for the super chat. That is great. I really, truly appreciate it. And anybody with super chat, you and your members always get to the top of the pile. So, Rob, are the Chiefs going to have their rings fixed if there is a typo? Obviously, I know you're talking about the Dolphins as the 7 seed. I've been told by multiple people who have a ring that, yes, it does say that the Dolphins were the 7 seed. I have not talked to anybody that has any concerns about it whatsoever. Those rings, I think we saw the report, close to $40,000 in value. A couple of people that I talked to, what they told me was that, hey, they really truly appreciate everything that went into the rings. They appreciate the Hunt families, plunging so much into those rings, putting so much value into them. They feel like it's a small thing, that it's not a real big one. I haven't heard if they're going to fix them at all. Maybe they will. I don't know how hard it is to fix something like that on a ring. I don't know how hard it is to fix them on all of the levels of rings. Obviously the players get one that's different from some of the other employees. They have 2 or 3 different levels of rings that are given out. I haven't seen the exact number that the team gave, but I know that between the players and everything, I think it would have, and employees, it's going to be somewhere in at least the 500 to 600 number of rings. How easy to fix all of them, even if you're just fixing the biggest, the top tier ones, I don't know. I don't know I don't know if it's that important to anybody, because they just feel like that the important details are right, that's a really small one. They're really grateful for, what they've, gotten from from the hunts and these rings. So I haven't heard from anybody who's like demanding to get their typo gets fixed or anything. I don't know what's going to happen, Rob. If I find out, I'll let you all know, but Right now, I think a lot of, at least the people I've talked to, a handful of people I've talked to about it, said they're just not concerned about it. So I I don't know. I'd like to think I'm in the same ballpark that I'd be okay. Hey, it's like, hey, things like that happen. So mistakes happen. Things got slipped by. So I I don't think it's a big deal, but I can see why. Hey, Clark may want to fix it too. So I don't know. Maybe Jostens wants to make sure it gets fixed because it slipped by them too. So Gary, I guess you got to clarify the question here about how you feel about the tight end they drafted this year, Jared Wiley. If Nick here, I know he and I would say the exact same thing, and you can go back to our conversation on 41 is the mic if you haven't listened to that yet, because we talked about Jared quite a bit on Thursday, wrapping up OTAs. But he's legit. I mean, I've been really impressed with him. Obviously, he was sold as a blocking first tight end, and I still think he may very well be a great blocking tight end, but I feel like that was, we were sold a little bit of bill of goods because he's a much better pass catcher than anyone ever tried to convince me before, during the draft whatsoever. He's been really impressive. He's got great size. He is athletic. He has got good movement, good hands. The size is a big thing, and the athleticism is a big thing. I am not putting any pressure on him. I am not going to tell you that he's the next Travis Kelce. I'm not saying anything like that. But can this kid play? Yeah. And can he be a red zone target? Yeah. I mean, once again, our motto around here, Gary, it's when the pads come on, what's he going to look like? Is he going to still be able to make the same catches when people are, pounding him in the end zone and they're grabbing him and they're pushing him around and hitting him on contact with the football? I mean, is he still going to hold on to it? That's the question. But so far, Jared Wiley has ticked off every single box that I've got for a tight end. I mean, was that impressive. I did not see Travis during his first couple of years with the team. My first year on the beat was in 2016. But I can tell you, this is and like I said, this is not trying to get the hype train going, but this is the most impressive tight end I've seen in this time of year that the Chiefs have had since Travis and outside of Travis. So once again, your mileage may vary, but we'll see what happens when the pads come on, Gary. But I have been super impressed with Jared and throughout this entire offseason program. He's been really impressive. Saverio, maintenance question. I love maintenance questions. How would you feel about the Chiefs putting all retired jersey numbers back in circulation to avoid doubling up on numbers and such? I probably wouldn't be a big fan of it. I know that the Chiefs have retired a lot of numbers. I think they've retired more numbers than any other team. And that does cause a little bit of the issue. And certainly now that, the NFL has opened up some numbers, it does make things a little bit easier so that a lot of positions can wear multiple numbers. It used to be a real problem, but it's something that every team still kind of deals with. I mean, you're still going to be pushed by limitations that receivers can only wear certain numbers and offensive and defensive linemen can only wear certain numbers. And honestly, I mean, part of it is they still give the players a chance to kind of wear the numbers that they want and kind of earn the numbers that they want. So when a player does come in, if they wore 24 in the past, they're not going to let the fact that Sky Moore's wearing 24, especially because I'm trying to remember which of the veterans is wearing that on the defensive side. I don't want to get the wrong one. And of course I have the wrong roster in front of me. But let's see. So, yeah, I was going to say, I think it's Kelvin Joseph. And yes, it is Kelvin Joseph is wearing 24. He hasn't made a team yet. So if he wants to wear 24, and now he may have also been given 24 because they had some 24 jerseys that were his size laying around. I mean, that happens too, Saverio. So sometimes it's just the easiest thing. They're so unworried about jersey numbers, during the offseason, and they'll still let sometimes practice squad players wear a second number, duplicate number, if it's, not a concern. That it's not somebody that obviously would have to change it if they ever bring that player up and active for a game. But I I don't know. I think I would still keep him retired. I do get that makes a problem because now the Chiefs are. I mean, and all those guys earned it. I mean, that's what I would say is that I don't think it would be even for what guys that have passed away, if they haven't, with their permission, anything like that. And I think that the players that are coming up also would feel the same way. I mean, I'm assuming the story and the legend that I've always told is true, that Lynn Dawson gave his blessing to Joe Montana, that if he wanted to wear 16, he could have worn 16, but Joe didn't want to wear 16. So that's why he went to, 19 college number. I mean, there was a solution. I think a lot of players would be the same way. I mean, I'm sure that for some players, I bet there's a little reluctance to wear 88. I mean, even though because it hasn't been retired yet. I think there's got to be some players who are like, it's Tony's number. I think that would definitely be the case with some of the numbers. Definitely the numbers have been retired. I don't think that, hey, nobody wants to wear 37. That has too much. That's too sacred for the Chiefs. 16, nobody wants to wear that. 58, nobody wants to wear that. So, I think, to me, I'd probably keep him retired. I get it. And especially now, like I said, with the changes in numerals, you could probably get almost everybody a non-duplicate number. But that's probably a very long answer, Gary. I apologize, but I think I'd stick with the policy as it is. Joe, another one of our members here, question about the Chiefs talking about Kansas City, Missouri out of stadium. I'm tired of the one-sided news and hearing nothing about talks with Missouri. Here's the problem, Joe. There's no talks. I mean, there's literally nothing going on. Mayor Lucas said today in his statement that, the Missouri side of the equation was still in the first quarter of negotiations. There's just nothing going on. And, and part of that is that there's still a standstill as far as deciding what is the solution in the Missouri side for the Chiefs. Is the solution going to be another proposal to refurbish Arrowhead and reimagine Arrowhead? Is the proposal going to be, hey, you stay in Kansas City, Missouri, but now it's a Kansas City, Missouri stadium and not a Jackson County stadium? I know that Mayor Lucas has been quoted as saying that the Kansas City has tried to acquire, the sports complex from Jackson County and take over and do something going forward. Maybe that's going to happen. I don't know. That's the problem. But there's so many problems on the Missouri side. I mean, one is that like I mentioned at the top of the show, they still have not addressed sports wagering, which is going to be a huge part of these stadiums if they go into Kansas, because Kansas does have it. The Chiefs want to be able to have kiosks and have their sponsors and all of this being a part of a new stadium. And without being able to do that in Missouri right now, that is a huge issue. You've got to clear that. So then you're going to have a local municipality. You're going to have negotiations with the state and with the General Assembly to get revenue for a new stadium. I mean, and none of that's really taken place yet. Kansas did a lot of work behind the scenes so far. And I say this as a Missouri resident and a Missouri voter. I mean, Joe, I'm pretty frustrated too that the state of Missouri, for the most part, hasn't lifted a finger with both of these teams. I mean, they have really taken a wait and see approach, and certainly in this case, I mean, they've waited to see what Kansas was going to put on the table. Now they know what they need to match. I just still don't know, and I see no momentum whatsoever towards Missouri putting together an alternative, and that's frustrating. And I get your frustration too. I mean, it's like saying you're tired of the one-sided news. I mean, it's hard to have two sides of the story when one side's not doing anything, and that is pretty frustrating. So I'm with you there, and I hope that Missouri does. I mean, I said as a resident of Missouri, and not wishing Kansas any ill will, but I'm a Missouri guy, so I'd like to see at least one, if not both, these teams stay in Missouri. And right now, there's just nothing going on. So I hope that changes, and that we do get some news and story going forward. I know Nick's in the green room, so. He is ready. So let's welcome to the show our friend Nick Jacobs.
Hi. I saw the Jared Wiley signal, so I came running.
I should have saved that, but I did mention, our conversation about Jared on the podcast. So to go listen to 41 is the mic, because we are big Jared Wiley fans.
Yeah, he's a talented tight end who has a lot of promise for the team, and can learn a lot from Travis Kelce and already has a lot of the fundamentals that you want a tight end to have and potentially be the heir apparent to where there's not – he may not be Travis Kelce, but there's not going to be a complete drop-off, if that makes sense, to where, like, you know, you're starting from scratch all over again. Like, he's more like Kelce than he's like other tight ends the Chiefs have had on their roster over time. Doesn't mean he has the same athletic ability and the same explosiveness, but – he's at least closer to it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the same kind of type, because I think that's a real key, is that the Chiefs have not had a guy like that. They haven't had a big, 6'6" body that's, similar size, similar bulk of Kelce that can, spot up, in the red zone, can spot up in a zone. I mean, he can do those kinds of things, and he can use his size to his advantage. The Chiefs have had some, smaller, receivers like a Noah Gray that, have athleticism too, but there's a significant height difference between him and Noah Gray. And that's a big deal to me. I mean, they've had Demetrius Harris had some size, but he was also not a polished tight end. He was a project from day one as a basketball player. So to me, that's the thing, is this is the guy that is most Kelce-like that we've seen in Kansas City in a while, but he's also got a ton of experience. He's got decent athleticism too. So that is a couple of things that you enjoy seeing in a tight end, is all I'm saying. Let's see where we're going next. I'm going to try to relieve you of having to talk about stadium, Nick. So,
well, you're fine. Talk away.
I did enjoy. I need to put that comment up there. There was a couple that I did enjoy. Ozzy was noting that Luis Rees-Zammit was at the T Swift show in Wales today. Roster lock. I mean, if you're not using your ends to get it into Taylor Swift and the Chiefs roster right now, you're just not. I mean, you got to take that advantage, Nick. I mean, so that's one. But
I mean, I don't know what tickets cost, but I mean,
if I'm on that 90-player roster right now, 91 players, I'm absolutely using all my ends to get some T Swift tickets. So, and I think that there was a great comment here that summed up the feelings on the stadium from James. I live in Missouri, but I don't care where they play as long as it isn't Texas.
Yeah, I mean, there's twofold on this point with the stadium. And I'll add another thing into this. Like, for Jackson County and for Kansas City, the question is going to become, if they lose them down the road, whether it's Royals, Chiefs, or both, then the taxes that they were able, when players had to play at the stadium or concerts were held at the stadium, or events were held at the stadium, how much are they going to lose per year? That's a number that I'm intrigued to know, and I want to know what that's going to cost people of Jackson County that have spent and invested through their taxes, or people like you and I when we're in Jackson County and we go to a store and and we buy goods and everything in Jackson County. What are they going to potentially lose off that? And then that's the biggest thing that I'm concerned for Kansas City and Jackson County, is what are they going to financially lose if both teams are not in there and they're not getting some of those taxes to be able to, pay for things that they have on budget. Then the other part is that this whole situation, this isn't going to be resolved in a week. This isn't going to be resolved in a day. This isn't going to be resolved, like, this is going to be ongoing for quite some time. Like, this could be literally a topic every week for the next 2 years, probably. And I just don't think that this is going to be resolved as quickly as everybody's going to get frustrated about it over the next, coming months and maybe even years with what they're attempting to do or what they're trying to do to give their businesses the best deal possible between Kansas or Missouri or wherever. But like James said, the number one thing for me is, are they still in the region to where we can cover them for you and I, and can they still make an economic impact collectively on the area? Like, those are the biggest things that, more than anything else, that I'm hoping at least happens. Because if the chances that they were to move to another state, then that's when stuff gets really concerning and stuff gets real. And I thought you brought up a great point earlier when it comes to what Missouri does with sports betting. What they do with sports betting, I think, is going to play a massive role and what can or can't happen and what financially could or couldn't happen and how they could work through stuff. Just like there's a lot of stuff that I'm intrigued to find out down the road here about the star bonds in Kansas and where the money is going to come from. I know what they're thinking and what projections are from what they've said publicly, but where does it truly come from? And where, and there's questions I'm curious to find out down the road about that. But I know all those are not going to be answered within a week. They're not going to be answered within a year for the most part. But all that combined is what I'm intrigued when it comes down to it. And that's going to be a process over time.
Yeah, and this is just a step one in a very, very long process, because just because the Kansas has approved the star bonds, there's a million different more steps that they have to go through. I mean, obviously they have to select the site. I know the state senator said today there's 5 or 6 sites that they're considering. None of them are joint sites, so it would if both the Chiefs and the Royals cross the state line, they wouldn't be in a complex like they are now. But even in the Royals case, or the Chiefs case, excuse me, there's multiple pieces there. The Chiefs have 4 elements to me that are kind of important. I mean, it's a stadium, but there's also the training complex, there's their headquarters, and there's training camp. I mean, those are 4 pieces. They don't have to be in the same place. The Chiefs, if they wanted to, could absolutely build a training complex somewhere. They could build a headquarter building for their 200 plus employees that are not related to the football side of the equation, that do the marketing and some of these things, and HR and sales. I mean, they don't have to be in the complex. And there's teams that have separate buildings and facilities for all of these things. Teams do it all out of different ways. The Chiefs have obviously considered moving to Kansas training camp. I mean, they've considered proposals there. So it's nothing new. I mean, the training camp could stay in St. Joe for eternity. It could move to Kansas. We don't know. There's also probably just the fact that training camp at a remote location is probably only going to stay as long as Andy Reid's head coach. And the next head coach is probably going to get to have training camp at their facility, whether they like it or not. But the stadium isn't going to open for 7 years. They got plenty of time to work things out and to figure out all the details and where things are going to go. And I mean, there's still a lot of pieces. This is step one of 198,000 things. Not that many, but there's a lot of things that still have to take place. And I'm not poo-pooing that Missouri can't still get involved, but I think after today, I mean, I definitely think that the Chiefs ending up in Kansas is 90% likelihood at this point. But I've been wrong before, so. I did talk about this earlier, but Rob, I appreciate the super chats. That's the only reason I was going to bring it up. And I don't know, Nick, if you have any insight. I mean, the details with the second Isaiah Buggs arrest are very ugly. If you haven't seen them, I know The Athletic was reporting them this evening. It's very disappointing. I mean, obviously there's always 2 sides every story, multiple sides every story. I'm certain that the Chiefs are doing their due diligence, but if you've seen the Athletic story, you do know that it has some ugly details. Nick, this is a slow time of the year for the NFL because a lot of people are on vacation and not in the office. I mean, this is typically a dead period in the NFL. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Chiefs were doing their own due diligence and took their own time. But and certainly I hope that the details are inaccurate because it's an ugly situation.
I don't know any of that stuff because it's been an off day for me. So
that's true. You're on vacation today. It's an off day.
So for me, it's an off day. So spoiler alert, guys, I really don't pay attention to my Twitter account very much or anything going on in the world because I like to decompress and reset from what I do when I am on the clock during the week. So because whenever you got to be plugged in, you got to be plugged in. As Matt knows, you got to be plugged in all the time. And for me, I got to be plugged into a lot of different sports and pay attention to a lot of different things. And when I get done with my shift, I don't want to do anything related towards it. And so, especially on off days, I haven't really paid attention to anything that's gone on. Might have been on Twitter this morning and retweeted a couple things that I saw on the timeline at that time, but after that, I just went on about my day and got everything done that I normally do on a Tuesday. Still got a couple things on the list between the grocery store, trash and laundry. Still got 2 things to get accomplished there, but No, I mean, look, it's here's what I'll say without really knowing a lot of details is from an optics perspective when it came out, it wasn't going to be a good look no matter what the details were for that to be the second time in a month span, I think, to have something pop up like that. So in that wasn't going to be good. I was waiting to see what details came out and what the whole story was going to be to kind of have a whole scope of everything. And like I said, I haven't looked at any of that. That'll be later on. That won't be during the Q&A, and then I'll go from there. But I mean, it's unfortunate to hear from you that the details are not that they're concerning. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I get a little sensitive on these things just because I want to be very fair. I mean, you have to be with any of these things because they are allegations. Nothing's been proven yet, so certainly you want to have a little bit of that element. I mean, would I say that the Chiefs are not interested in having drama of this situation? Yes, but there are always extenuating circumstances. There are sometimes things that the teams know that I don't know. So sometimes there's things that the team knows that the public doesn't know. I mean, those things happen. I mean, so that's the only reason why I'm trying to be a little bit circumspect here. I haven't also had anybody tell me specifically, from the team what's going to happen. I mean, and once again, part of that is that once they got their rings on Thursday night, everybody in the organization went about 300 different ways. I mean, that's just how this time of the season is right now. So
they're taking their off days too, Matt.
Even if the Chiefs even took some time before they made a decision on the Isaiah Bug situation, it would not surprise me. So just because of the nature of this time of year. So there you go. Having a brain fog there moment. Looking at all the comments and questions and everything.
756 is probably your next one. I would imagine.
I saw some others. So, because, Jason, I guess I saw your question about I guess you've kind of gotten a little bit of everything between the Isaiah Bugs news and the stadium news. Here's one from Nancy I did see I wanted to bring up because I haven't really talked about this much. But, Nancy, I was told if the Chiefs moved to Kansas, the season ticket members will have to pay a one-time license fee in addition to the price of a season ticket. The license fee is estimated around $5,000. Have you heard about this? I mean, Nancy, I have not heard anything specific about it, but like Nick was talking about, I mean, the funding mechanisms in these stadiums, a reality of it is that seat licenses are fairly standard in brand new stadiums. And you're correct. I mean, a seat license is in effect and around a lot of, maybe in every single new NFL stadium, Nick. I haven't been paying a ton of attention, but it's in a lot of stadiums. So I haven't heard anything about a seat license. I mean, obviously they are way too early in the process to know for sure. And I haven't seen or heard that there's anything that's been, discussed as far as the legislation goes about seat licenses. But I would expect that there probably will be. How much they will be is a good question, but that's going to be one of the decisions that they have to make, Nick. I mean, between when they start negotiating, and well, in this case, it's probably going to be more of a development agreement because that's another difference between Missouri and Kansas is that Missouri, Kansas with the Star Bonds is essentially going to be issuing the bonds for the Chiefs to be able to own their own stadium. That's never going to happen in Missouri. I mean, in Missouri, it's going to be a municipality that's always going to probably own the stadium. So we're probably not talking about a lease agreement, even though I've kind of used that term a little bit in dealing with Kansas. We're probably talking more about a development agreement about building a stadium, but seat licenses are going to be a part of that, Nick.
Matt, here's what I'm saying. People aren't going to like it. So back in the day, you had a cart and you had a horse, We're already trying to talk about the groceries to put in the cart we don't have and the horse we don't have right now. So, I mean, and I obviously haven't heard anything like that. And I think that's one of those details that would be very down the road. And for now, I would assume that's a speculative thing. And that's people probably basing off other stadiums that have happened. But I mean, for any of us to have heard that or have anything concrete on that when they don't even know where the heck they're going to play at yet and have anything financing plan wise done, I just think we're 50 steps away from being able to have any concrete answer on that type of question.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm completely with you, and that's why I say that. Hey, I mean, this is step one of 198,000 things that have to happen. I mean, it's not actually that long of a list, but it's pretty darn close to it. And yeah, just looking around, I mean, it does look like, most teams do have PSLs, personal seat licenses for any of the new stadiums. Allegiant Stadium in Vegas has it. So it's probably coming. I mean, that was an issue in St. Louis with the Rams. They sold personal seat licenses. And of course, then when they moved, those people then no longer had seats in the stadium for that team. So I think there was even a lawsuit about that. So let's hope that never happens, Nick. Let's get
the horse and cart first.
I don't want to talk about, the Chiefs, leaving Kansas, leaving the Kansas City, Wyandotte County in 2075. So I'm not going to take you down that road. I was just going to bring up Julia Guglia's comment so I can say Julia Guglia on the discussion again. Nico hype train. People are on the Nico hype train, Nick.
Gee, I wonder why. I wonder why. Did they get some reports or something, or hear about them on multiple podcasts? Or hear about them
why not be on the Nico hype train? Julia Gully even had a question. So there we go. Beautiful. Spags was hovering around Curtis Jacobs. Last time he was seen hovering around a rookie was Brian Cook. Good sign. Oh, I mean, yeah, when Spags hovers around you, it's always a good sign. And he's hovered around Curtis Jacobs. He's hovered around Jaden Hicks. But, I mean, I know pads haven't come on, Nick, but your namesake is worth watching once we get to training camp.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll have my eyes on Curtis Jacobs. So I'll be, just for the name alone. I mean, you're rooting for Jacobs to succeed on the Chiefs roster. So totally get that part. I mean, when Steve Spagnuolo takes you aside and really starts coaching you up whenever you're not out there with certain reps and everything, that's a good thing. And so he obviously sees something in Curtis and he sees something in Hicks. And so those are things that if you go up to Chiefs training camp, that'll be something to kind of keep a little eye on, is who is he coaching off to the side. Because whenever a coach talks to a player one-on-one and kind of coaches them through things, that means they see potential in them and they're trying to get them better and up to speed. Doesn't mean that they're not coaching everybody. It just means when you see it on the field right there in that moment, they're wanting to get that fixed from a rep perspective or something, but it is always promising when they're coaching.
There you go. Yep. When Spags takes an interest in you, that is always a good sign. So, Alistair, couldn't Missouri build a new stadium next to the river or some body of water and then have the betting kiosk on location above the water? I mean, that's obviously in reference to Missouri has riverboat gambling, but Missouri doesn't have sports wagering. So it's not even in Missouri. It's not even available in the casinos that were once upon a time river based, but aren't anymore. So no, I mean, until Missouri gets off its patootie and legalizes sports wagering in Missouri, that is a huge piece of the puzzle that we don't have in Missouri. So it's going to be tough. Let's see. Gary, Chiefs players that make it to the Hall of Fame number should not be put on again. This was a question that came up earlier, Nick, and I'll ask you now that with Gary kind of phrasing the number here. Chiefs have retired more numbers than anybody. We had this kind of conversation, I think, a couple of weeks ago. But would you be okay with recirculating some numbers that have been retired?
There's some that I would not be for bringing back, because let me look at the Chiefs retired numbers really quickly. I know one offhand that I would keep a certain way forever, and that would be Joe Delaney.
Yeah,
the sacrifice he made to try to go save those kids, like that was much bigger than football.
Well, the Chiefs they have 10 retired numbers.
So that would
I'm trying to pull up the list here of all of them. I thought I had the correct link, and I did not.
And the crazy thing is, Joe Delaney's number's technically not retired. It's just never been worn since then. And same for DT originally. And then it was retired in 2009.
Yeah.
So
the 10 numbers: Jan Stenerud, Lynn Dawson, Emmett Thomas, Abner Haynes, Stone Johnson, Mackley Hill, Derrick Thomas, Willie Lanier, Bobby Bell, and Buck Buchanan. Stone Johnson died after an injury in a preseason game in 1963. That's very kind of similar to Mackley Hill. And with Joe Delaney, I would also, those three numbers would not be touched. I think that would be inappropriate. But even Gary asking about, honestly, Gary, the Chiefs have more retired, have more Hall of Famers than they do retired numbers. So, if we're going to take the Hall of Fame numbers out of circulation, then we're taking even more, because now 88 comes out. And I've wondered this, Nick, and I never asked Jody Fortune or anybody else. I've wondered, about how some players feel, because I know the legend has it that, Len Dawson gave his grace, his blessing to Joe Montana to wear 16 if he wanted to, but Joe didn't think that it was appropriate. I kind of wonder, how some players do feel about that. Like, that's 88's Tony Gonzalez. I don't know if I'd want to wear 88 if I'm in Kansas City. What are they going to do with 87 when Travis goes on? They're going to retire.
What are they going to do with 15?
15 are going to retire. I have no doubt about that. I would assume, but I don't know. You do run into a fact that you can't retire everything, but
yeah, I guess if it ever happens for the Chiefs, I guess they can try to ask some of the players while they're still living if they're okay with, unretiring their number, I guess, if they want to, for, maybe Bobby Bell or Jan Stenerud and some of those guys, but and then kind of get those back into circulation. But somebody that had the impact on the franchise like Len Dawson did, that one you just, you keep it as, because not just when Len was on the field, but when Len was in media too, and how he covered the team and how he did, the color commentary on radio and on being on Inside the NFL and everything that Len did from a media perspective. Len was still heavily involved with the organization, to where that one I think would still be worthy no matter the circumstance or situation, because the impact Lynn and Patrick Mahomes have both had on this organization is what defines who the Chiefs are.
I completely agree. So yeah, I think it would be tough. I come down on leaving the retired numbers retired. I think there's a handful that you will continue to retire, and you'll just live with the consequences. And if that means that Kelvin Joseph and Sky Moore both wear 24 during training camp, it's okay by me. So Jimmy has a really intriguing question, Nick. Hey guys, please describe how your interviewing questioning style has evolved over time. Lessons learned, places you can't or don't go, open-ended versus yes, no, etc. Learn yourself or get told. Thank you. There's a couple things I want to say here. And, one is that, and I know this will mean something to you, Nick. I got to watch one of the best, and I learned and changed so much about how I ask questions and how I talk to players and how I go about things from watching Terez Paylor in the Chiefs locker room, and getting to sit next to him for a couple of seasons was just an absolute masterclass in NFL reporting. Because when I came on the beat in 2016, I hadn't been a reporter for a few years. I'd been in PR for a while, so it was an evolution for me. And and I was a little ragged. I'm not gonna lie. I hadn't been a reporter for a few. It had been a few years, Nick. So I had some rust to shake off and everything. And there were some things that I did that just didn't make any sense. And I learned some lessons and everything. But there's so much that I learned from Terez, and so much of it is just about relationships. And that one thing I specifically do is that I will have days that I go into the locker room. I don't have a notebook. I don't have a recorder. I don't have my phone. Those days are just talking to guys. If I don't have a story that I'm working on, especially, or anything like that, but I try to do this periodically, with frequency, to just go in and talk to players and learn about them, without any destination in mind. And not that they can see any notes that are being taken or anything recorded, so they know that it's an unguarded moment, because you will learn about so many different things there. I'm working on a story. I've been working on it for a while. But I don't want to go into big time detail about it. But the only reason I know about this story is because I just talked to a player once, with no intent and purpose. It was just chatting. It's just, because, it's just like anything else. I mean, a football locker room isn't different than any other reporting environment. You're going to get your best stories, and you're going to get your best sources by developing relationships with people. I mean, that's just true in any business. If you're covering politics, if you're covering business, you're covering retail, you name it, anything that you're covering, you're going to get stories through relationships, and the players have to trust you. The coaches have to trust you. And that's, to me, I mean, the one thing that has definitely evolved with me, Nick, is that, I mean, I try to go in and talk to people, talk to my sources without any ulterior motive, just to have conversations with them, because that's just a big part of the job.
Is there anything you've learned question-wise?
Well, you are correct, Jimmy, is in that I do everything, if all possible, to avoid asking closed-ended questions and yes or no questions. You know, those don't get you anywhere, especially because every once in a while you ask that of a question of somebody and they're gonna take you literally, and they'll give you a yes or no answer, and then you feel like an idiot afterwards. I would say the other thing, of course, that I have learned has been to try to avoid poor wording. So one thing that my predecessor on the Chiefs Digest beat, Herbie Teope, used to mock me for, and he mocked everyone for, would be whenever we would say, "I'm curious." He's like, if you're a reporter, you're already curious. So you don't really need to tell us that you're curious in your question. You wouldn't be asking the question if you weren't curious. So I have tried my best to stop doing that, or any variation thereof. So I try not to say, "Are you curious?" I have tried to make sure that I never say to a player or a coach, "Talk about this." No, I mean, I'll ask, "Hey, describe the play. What happened there? Tell us what happened on that play. What did you see on that throw?" Those are the things I will ask. I won't say, "Hey, I'm curious. What's going through your mind?" I mean, no. I try to avoid those things, Nick.
Yeah, I say I'm curious a lot, so now I'm gonna be on edge about that. So that's great.
Now you're down here with me, so I still do it, Nick. I mean, I know I still fall into traps. I still ask bad questions. Everybody still asks bad questions. So I try to never make any fun of anybody too much for their questions, because we all ask some dumb questions.
Yeah, I mean, when you first go into one, the locker room, or two, to the press conferences, you first want to observe how the hierarchy is, or how it's supposed to be, and how it goes about the questions. And for example, whenever I first joined working on the Chiefs beat on a regular basis back in 2010, 2011 there, the first three questions for the most part were going to be Teicher, Bob Gretz, because they'd both been on the beat the longest, and that was a sign of respect to them, because they've been on the beat, they can set the tempo. And then after that, it varied from time to time, whether that maybe would be Herbie, or whether that, and then at one point, whenever, Therese joined back in 2013, and when he got bumped up for the Mizzou beat, and then Therese, would normally be one of the first three questions, and like you would just like in basketball, you would stand out of the lane and let the beat writers work that were doing that. And that was the level of respect that some people would show, some would not, but it's just a respect for somebody that's put in the grind the entire time on that beat. So there's a lot of people you're never going to hear ask the first or second question. And the reason they're not is because they're showing respect to the people that have been there the longest. Because Teicher's the longest tenured guy on the beat right now, since he's been doing it since the early to mid 90s, when he's with this Kansas City Star before he went to ESPN. And Teicher's seen a lot of lean years. Teicher's been a part of a lot of years, a lot of training camps, and a lot of stuff. And Adam deserves that respect. I will always give Adam that respect, because I respected what he did, and I used to read what he did for quite some time. And then so I like to obviously respect the beat writers, and let them get the quotes that they have to get, because also the other part of it is if you ask a specific question, like the reality is this: the person you're interviewing whether it's in a group setting or not, either might get defensive or shut down. And then nobody's getting a good answer or a good quote or a good soundbite after that. And what I mean by a good quote or good soundbite, I'm not saying you're trying to play a game of gotcha. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
What I'm saying is when people feel comfortable in the setting and they respect the writers that are out there or the photogs or beat reporters or whoever are out there, they're going to give you good answers if they're comfortable. And so until they navigate that, you're just not going to get you're not going to be able to connect the audience with that player. And that's the number one thing of what beat writers are supposed to do, is they're supposed to be the person in between that helps connect you to that player so you can learn more about them, or you learn more about that week, or you learn more about a player, you learn more about whatever it may be. And that's the whole purpose of what media is supposed to be, in my opinion, is you are connecting the audience with the team or with the person. And you're obviously still reporting on things that may not be ideal, may not be favorable, may not be comfortable, but that's just a part of what that is. So another thing I will say here, and we're going to wander because this is Matt and I's masterclass, so enjoy it. But for me, from a question perspective, when I started working on that beat, I wanted to make sure people got an opportunity to learn something. So any question I asked, I wanted it to be for fans to be able to learn something about that person or a play or the player. So anytime you've heard me ask questions, for the most part, it has been with that in mind and trying to create that. And as Matt can attest, whenever I ask a question, we all normally get a good quote or good bite about it, or we all learn something from it in that room. So that is my sole purpose when I'm in there and whenever I'm asking a question. And there's sometimes whenever somebody's asked 4 or 5 questions and, the same person asked the same 4 or 5 questions, or, same person asked 4 or 5 different questions. None of them are really that fruitful. And, but we've ran out of time. So then I'm like, all right, well, I'll, punt till next time. As for example, we ran out of time last Thursday and, I wanted to ask Andy kind of a little bit of a playful question towards the end there. I want to be like, hey, Andy, do you have any, now you're going to be on vacation. Do you have any acting gigs coming up? Because I know in your family, you've got a rising star with your wife, Tammy, doing a guest appearance as a journalist on, SWAT. And then Andy's got all those commercials that he's been doing. So is there anything we should be on the lookout for here coming up here? And, there's probably some media members that are going to listen to this, and that may get asked before I get to ask it again. But that was something that I kind of wanted to ask, but I wanted to ask it towards the end of the interview so that people that had to get legitimate things about players' injuries or things of that nature, they were able to get, and I could get something that kind of ended the presser on a right note, because that's also the spot sometimes where you've got to navigate what the circumstance of what they're having the press conference about. So that's not something I would ask on a day where, Rick Burkholder is giving an update on BJ Thompson, and that was a much more serious matter. So, I mean, those are probably, I would say for the most part, those are the biggest things. But whenever I ask a question, I'm asking something that they're going to have to elaborate on. And there's not a chance to say yes or no, because if there's some players that don't like to be at the podium, and if you give them a chance with a yes or no situation, they will take it. And just so they can have fulfilled their requirement and kind of move on. And it's not a knock on them. It's just they're not comfortable being up at that podium. And like Matt said, the other thing is when you go in a locker room, for me, the problem I have most of the time is I've got a camera on my shoulder. So the problem I get into, and Matt knows this, is as soon as I turn that top light on to interview a player, there may be a flock coming over there. And for people, there was one time back when Travis was a rookie, and I said hey to Travis a couple times, and I came over there to chat with him, and he wasn't technically on the injury report yet. There was no none of that stuff and everything, and went over to go interview Travis, and we luckily there was some other player that people were talking to, so they didn't pay attention that Leaf and I were over there talking to Travis. So we got a question or two in, and since Travis was a rookie at that time, Travis told us what his injury was and all that stuff. And like, you know, I felt bad. I'm like, oh no, man, this is not what I was trying to do. And I wasn't the one asking the question, but I was recording on the camera, and I'm like, oh boy, well, it's fun talking to Travis this year. And then, you know, Travis ended up having to go in the injury report because he had a microfracture. And, you know, but just within a question or two, you've got everybody from the media corps coming over because it's Kelsey. And then, you know, everybody sees that opportunity in that window, and then they get into it. So some of the things I have to do, the complication with having a camera is there's sometimes, hey, I may go like Jeff Allen used to like, hey, I'd be like, hey, I'm going to turn this on. We'll ask 2 questions, and then I'll dip out. So, because I know you don't want to talk very long. But Jeff would talk for me. Donald Stevenson would talk to me. Rodney Hudson, Mitchell Schwartz, those guys. They would all chat with me, and DeVito would as well. And a handful of other guys. But like, I'd go over there. I'd be like, boom, get this question. And then top light off, boom. And then they'd go walk on their way. But that had been built up over time because they respected what I was doing on Twitter. And like, I remember there was one time I had a conversation with one of the players. I mean, dude, I felt bad about, you know, doing that breakdown on Twitter. He's like, oh, dude, that's what your job is, man. He's like, you didn't say anything that was wrong. And above all else, he's like, you know, like, I appreciate you doing it the way that you do. So whenever I do these breakdowns and people want me to do this type of stuff, I do it with the mindset that I'm being respectful to the work that each player's put in, and to also understand I don't know everything, and I'm never going to know everything. And the only way I'm going to know even more than what I read in books or what I observe or what I learn is by actually being on NFL coaching staff, and I don't see that ever happening. So I've just accepted I have my limitations, but I can ask the people involved to learn from those. And finally, worst question I've ever asked, Matt, and I apologize.
Ooh.
It isn't necessarily the worst question, but I didn't phrase it right. So Dave Tobe had fun with it, and he really enjoyed pelting me on it. This is when Niall Davis was the kick punt returner that year. And I asked Dave, I said, Dave, do you remember, and I didn't phrase it correctly, I said, do you remember a time where you had a returner that could just cut and go the way that he did? And Dave just looked at me like dumbfounded. He's like, yeah, Devin Hester. I was like, okay. I was like, let me rephrase it. Somebody of Niall's size. Because Devin Hester wasn't the same size as Niall Davis, but I didn't put that in the question. So then, like, you know, Dave's like, yeah, Devin Hester. And I'm like, yeah, no, okay, that's not, I didn't put this part in there. So that's on me. So
we've all been there.
Yeah. So you just got to be, because for Niall being 230 plus pounds, the way the dude could do one cut and go, like, there wasn't a lot of returners his size that could do it at that speed and get to that top end speed at that level. Could Devin Hester do that? Yeah, but he wasn't his size. But since I didn't put that in the question, Dave Tobe had a little fun with it.
Yeah, we've all been there. You know, I co-sign almost exactly everything that you say. I'll give you a good example of kind of one of my pet peeves from a recent press conference, and kind of how I navigate things a little bit, because I mean, one thing that I think that we sometimes do a really, really bad job of is letting conversations resolve themselves and letting a discussion go on. I mean, because sometimes, you know, follow-up questions are absolutely warranted on some topics. And, you know, and sometimes somebody will interrupt a great, you know, back and forth conversation with a question on a completely different subject when there was a little bit more to ask. And so that always kind of bothers me. And it's also, to me, always a tough judgment about when do you change the subject when there is, especially an important topic. We've had some of those recently that I felt like, you know, when we had the Clark Hunt press conference during the NFL draft, you know, I kind of felt like the stadium discussion was going on a little bit too long. So I thought we've only got so many minutes with Clark Hunt. You only get so many opportunities with Clark Hunt. I don't really want to spend, you know, 3/4 of the time talking about the stadium, but I'm also not just, if I don't have a question for Clark Hunt, I'm not going to ask him one. If somebody's already asked my question, I'm not going to invent a question to ask Clark Hunt. I mean, that's not how I operate. And so, I mean, I rarely ask a first question unless I feel like it's something relevant. Like, for instance, if I get a really good relationship with that player and I'm trying, like you said, get them off to a good start so that we're going to get some good stuff out of them. Because I'll tell you what, we get a player on the podium every once in a while who's not on the podium very often. They're nervous. and sometimes we get short answers. Sometimes a good way to open them up is to ask them a question that you know that they're going to talk about for a little bit to get them comfortable. I've done that. I mean, I will usually defer to my elders, like you said. I'll let Teicher start the conversation. That's to me, that's I definitely recognize the hierarchy. There's sometimes that, hey, if I got a really important question, I don't mind starting off the conversation. I've done it before, but a tough one for me was a couple of weeks ago when you'd mentioned Rick comes in and gives the update about BJ Thompson, and then Andy comes in, and then there was 5 or 6 questions about BJ, and all legitimate. I mean, there was no problem there, but we were getting shorter and shorter answers from Andy. So it was very clear he had said everything he wanted to say about it, and the topic needed to change. So I wanted to get the transition in. So I had a question that I wanted to ask. I felt like it was appropriate. So I just went ahead after 5 or 6 questions about BJ, especially the last one, I think was like 1 or 2 words. And I'm just like, hey, practice today. You're working on the Ravens. You've worked on the AFC West. How important is for you to begin that process right now, of getting ready for the regular season during this portion of the offseason, and, get the answer. But I felt like that had to be done because it was one of those points where it's like, I know Andy's personality, that when Andy gets really tired of a subject and starts getting short, he's 1 or 2 questions away from just being like, okay, I'm out of here. And then ejecting on the whole thing. And just everything becomes a 1-word answer because he's like, I'm done with this. I'm going to get out of here. I'm done with you people. So, I mean, I felt like it was important to change the subject because then I don't think that with BJ, that was one of those. I mean, sometimes there's some topics. I mean, he starts getting asked about Tyreek's podcast. That's going to set him off and he'll just yell at us. And I'm not afraid of being yelled at. I mean, I've gotten the look before. I've gotten the call from PR before about what are you doing asking that question. So we've all been there too. But I felt like, hey, you let the conversation go. Let there be a natural give and take. Don't interrupt another, conversation with changing the topic if there's a good riff going, But then again, sometimes it's important to change the topic because you're not going anywhere, and you're maybe 1 or 2 questions from just derailing the whole thing. So that's my 2 cents. You know what it's time for, Nick?
I do, but I'm not. I'm just gonna let you work.
I'm gonna let Dr. Ozzy announce it.
You know when I wonder, our burner account's been missing for a couple weeks now. Remember?
I remember. I'm counting on him being back here pretty soon.
I don't know. He's been gone for like 2 or 3 weeks, man.
Also, Ozzy, Willie Mays passed away, and I'm just going to say a quick story here because my mom was the best in the world, and the reason why I am a writer today is because my mom bought me books when I was a kid. She would love to go to old bookstores or library sales, anything like this, and just buy, inexpensive sports books. She bought me a couple of these at one point, and I think it was like there was 3 of them. I think she bought at one time, and one was Bill Russell's first autobiography that he wrote back in the 60s, which was incredibly illuminating to me. Another one was Bob Cousy's biography, which was also autobiography that he wrote. Well, I think at the end of his playing career, it was really, really cool. And another one was a weird book. It was a work of fiction, supposedly by this writer and Willie Mays. And then like the last couple of chapters of the book was how to play baseball and how to play center field by Willie Mays. And I mean, it was like a murder mystery was like the first part of the book. I mean, the first book. I mean, that's why today it's like so bizarre. I mean, like Willie Mays didn't write this. Somebody else wrote it. But then somebody, took Willie Mays' advice on how to play baseball and put it in the last few chapters. I'm sure Willie didn't write any of that book, but I still remember that. I've still got it on the shelf behind me. It's in tatters, but I have had that thing for 40 years. So I was not old enough to see Willie Mays play, but I still have that book and still remember it. So I always think of that when I think of Willie Mays, and I think of my mom. So there you go. Coach Cullen, will there be any, I don't know about that name, but we're cool. Will there be any roster moves on the linebacker side of things? With the way special teams has changed, will the emphasis be adding more thumpers? Nick, I'll let you start. That's a Nick Jacobs question if there ever was one.
I mean, I think right now they got the linebackers that they're going to have on the roster, and so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what kind of combination they want to have from between D lines, safeties, and linebackers. I don't think they're going to add additional linebackers, to the roster just simply for kickoff returns. But I don't know. It's an intriguing one that I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of years ago, they've carried as few as 4 linebackers at one time. I don't think that this is a 4 linebacker year. I mean, I think this is a 5 or a 6 linebacker year because they've got the talent, they got the depth, and special teams might affect that a little bit. So, I mean, there's been the question about, hey, will the special teams kickoff rule, will that favor maybe keeping an extra linebacker or a safety, a bigger player, on special teams than maybe you kept in the past when you had more gunners? Maybe. I mean, I could see it, but Chiefs, I think you're right. I mean, they're pretty deep at linebacker. I like what they got. So,
line around.
Alistair, I thought in Missouri you can gamble on the water. Is that still the case? Yeah, you can. I mean, that's the thing with Alistair. I mean, those were riverboat casinos, but now they are land-based. They changed the laws a couple of times over the years, where once it was like a boat and a moat, what eventually changed to, but now they are land-based casinos. But we still can't gamble on sports, Nick. Still against the law, so we don't have that. So. Can you imagine Wiley and Kelsey both running seam routes, Nick?
I don't have to imagine it.
You've seen it.
That's all I got on
that. Let's see. What do we got? Joe brings up an interesting point here. Jackson County, Missouri will have huge costs that will have to have the taxpayers if teams leave the state. Those Truman sports complexes won't take care of themselves. I will point out that when they were trying to get the sales tax money, for redoing Arrowhead and building a new Kaufman, that there was an estimate, I think, between $25 and $50 million it was going to cost to tear down Kaufman. I mean, and that was going to be paid for with the sales tax money. Now you might have 2 stadiums that you might have to tear down, and twice the cost, and nobody's going to pay for it. So now you're definitely don't have a funding mechanism to pay for that. So yeah, I would like to see Missouri kind of get its act together, Nick, but your mileage may vary. Lawrence, will Justin Reed actually kick this season, Nick?
Probably at some point. When that'll happen, I don't know, but I'm sure we'll see it at some point.
I mean, I think it's happening in week 1, but I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, maybe they'll save it for special occasions, but I think it's definitely going to happen. Brian, do you think Luis Rees-Zammit will make an impact on the team in 2024? You're gonna wait until the pads come on.
Like, until we can see he can take hits over and over again, and the NFL hits. I know people have mentioned in the comment section, like, well, he played rugby. Rugby's a whole different ballgame. Rugby didn't have Ray Lewis coming at you 100 miles an hour. Rugby didn't have Ed Reed coming at you, squaring you up and laying you out. Those are whole different ballgames.
But they had to wear pads. He did it without pads.
Again, there's no Ray Lewis and Ed Reed coming at you 100 miles an hour to take you down and to try to take your head off. So that's a whole different ballgame, whole different world that the Rees-Zammit lives in now. So I don't know. I don't know what he is, or I don't know what he will or won't do. Like, I wish I had an opinion for you, but I don't, because all I know is that he's really fast and runs upright. Like, that's all I can tell you. All I can tell you about him right now.
I was just getting ready to say that my favorite quote of the entire offseason was Andy Reid when I asked him about Luis Rees-Zammit's running style. He's like, yeah, I think he's going to change his pad alignment when he gets hit the first time.
Well, it was funny because I think you and I had talked about that like either that day or a day or two before. And I was like, Coach Reed said what you and I were talking about. That's awesome.
Yes. Sharon with a very important question, Nick. When training camp pad day, do the pads come on? And I can tell you that. I just need to look at the schedule again.
Yeah, their first day is the 21st, Matt.
It is the 21st. I know that. But you've got the acclimation day.
Yeah, I can't remember if it's
and
3 or 5.
It's 3, because it's the first day after the day off that they can put the pads on. So I am pulling it up now. And so, yes, the first day with pads is scheduled to be... it is the July 26th. It's 5 days, but it has to be at least I think that's 5 days. Something else. There's another, like, I think, second rule in that, but the 5-day one is the big one. But the Chiefs always do it after that first off day and then coming back. So July 26th should be the first day with pads, if I'm not mistaken. So you're guaranteed, if you were there on Friday the 26th, to see them in pads.
As long weather permitting.
Weather permitting. There you go. Mizzou 19. Do you think they're considering a defensive end addition via free agency, especially considering a Minnie Hughes absence? For instance, Jerry Hughes on a Dunlap type deal. One of the guys I was watching, Nick, went off the board this week with Calais Campbell signing with the Dolphins. I mean, that's always an emergency escape hatch right there. But what do you think? I mean, I still think they could use some depth along the defensive line. They signed a new young defensive tackle last week, but I mean, I think they could still use some depth. I'm just not sure if they think that they need some depth.
Yeah, I would say from a defensive line perspective, I mean, if there's somebody you really want as a one tech that you may need here in a couple weeks, I totally get it. Defensive end wise at this point, I mean, like, Hughes is going to be one of the better ones left. Agba, I don't see coming back, and Dockway can't handle the run, so you wouldn't really want to do that. Charles Harris, I don't know what he's got left in the tank. Marcus Golden can't really move, very stiff in the hips beforehand, and age only hampers that. So, I mean, I think if they're trying to get a defensive tackle, I totally get it, but defensive end wise, I feel like they're going to go with what they have unless they find something out with BJ Thompson that maybe they need to have an additional defensive end to kind of take his snaps while they come up with whatever answers they may need to find out about him. Hopefully they don't have to, but I'm just saying that's a circumstance where I'd see if they needed that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think Justin Houston's in that category either. So I
don't think you'll ever see Justin Houston back with the Chiefs.
I mean, like I said, I mean, I would have had some interest in Campbell just as a depth piece, but that's the other part of it too. I mean, I think that, you know, the Chiefs, even though I think they need some depth, I don't think that they need anything more than a fourth or a fifth, you know, in the depth chart, because you want to make sure that you are not. You know, I mean, you got Karlaftis, you got Dana, you're fine with those two guys, and you want Felix to get his work this year. So that's why I'm saying, I mean, I think that they could use some, but I'm just not sure. I'm with you. I'm not sure the pieces are out there to do that. Yeah. Nick, do you have time to answer the question or do you want to answer that question about your background in lightning round?
Yeah, sure. So in terms, I mean, after I graduated from high school, I took an internship 3 months later, and Matt and I got to work at the same spot for a while. Were you there at that time? When did you get over to?
I came over there in December of 2009.
Okay, because Herb's got there in 2006. So I got to meet Herbie back in 2006 whenever he worked at Metro Sports, which was owned by Time Warner. So
you two were old chums and working on Fantasy Huddle when I got there.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I started there 3 months after after I graduated high school in 2004, and so I was an intern. I ran teleprompter for Mick Schaefer, who I work with at KSHB, obviously, and for Jackson, Dave Stewart, Lee Fleisig, Brad Porter, Danielle Sargent for a little bit before she left to go to ESPN, and then Kenitra Williams when Kenitra came over, and D. Jackson for a little bit when he was there. And then from teleprompter, I edited a ton because I was really good at editing back then, as I'd done a first school show in high school. So there was that. And then over time, I got to learn the audio board. And then later on down the road, I finally became a producer. Well, I became a producer, and then I started photog in 2010, 2011. And so I was the primary photog out on the Chiefs beat starting in 2010 and went to a lot of that. and then I started producing in 2011. But I still did all the photog stuff. So very rarely you're going to find producers that shoot, edit, and produce their own shows. But I'm one of those. But I worked at a place that allowed you to do all that and wasn't a union shop and allowed you to learn all that type of stuff and be able to physically go do all that. Then I also learned how to TD and direct as well. So I knew how to punch the buttons and switch the cameras and do all that type of stuff. So, and then I have worked occasionally on the production truck. I did for FCKC games before they became the Kansas City Current. They're originally FCKC, and we did some of their games, and they were at Swope Soccer Village. So I got to do it for that. I get to run camera for a couple of our high school games at Sprint Center. When we had that on Martin Luther King Day, we had basketball games there. I can tell you one of the worst things doing on a production truck for me personally is the under the basket camera in basketball, because it is so heavy on your shoulder. Like, you don't have the stand like, you use with your hands to whenever you're the high 50 camera. I did that for a handful of things, and the amount of cable you run on a production truck and the pick up and tear down that they do on a production truck, like, I'm telling you, like, there's a lot of work that goes into production trucks. So that's why I've always respected all the guys and the work that they do to put those games on television, not only being in the elements, but also just the amount of cable they have to work with and deal with, the tearing down of a camera and putting the camera together. Like, there's a lot to it that I have a ton of respect for them on that. So did all that, and from 2011 until now, I've for the most part been a producer and edit and shoot still. So and then I did some on-air analyst work for the station too on MIAA, and some occasionally done some packages.
There you go.
I hope that answers that for you.
You were basically born in the Metro Sports studio.
Yes, I learned everything. I learned.
You were an infant child just tucked in the nursery with Mick Schaefer tending over you.
It wasn't just Meg. Dave Stewart taught me a ton, and Leaf Leisig taught me a ton. Tamiko taught me a lot about producing. Charlie Parker taught me a lot about producing. I know people aren't going to know a lot of these people. And Joe Novacek, Eric Ashel taught me a ton. So
God bless Curtis Lorenz and Joe Novacek trying to teach me how to wrap cable.
Yeah, and
it was. I still can't wrap cable, Nick.
Yeah, Curtis. For people that don't know, Curtis is he's well known in the production world because he's directed for a long time and he knows what the heck he's doing. I think he still probably does a lot of KU games. I'm not 100% sure, but him and Steve Kurtenbach, they were primary directors, and you hear Kurtenbach's name all the time on the Royals broadcast. But yeah, man, I hope that answers Ozzy's question. But yeah, this will actually be September. Will be 20 years that I've actually worked in this town, sports wise. If you include my internship, which I do.
I definitely do.
I got paid for that internship.
That's more than half your life, man.
Yeah, it is.
It's almost half my life.
Touché, sir.
James, how many tight ends and who will be on the Chiefs 53-man roster?
Hey, I'm willing to do this. It may vary from what it is, but Travis Kelce I got as the 1. Wiley I got as the 2. Noah Gray I have as the 3.
Yes.
Right now is the 4. I do think Irv Smith is going to make the roster right now. I think they'll keep 4 tight ends. But and then Cup from Baylor, I'm really intrigued with as a practice squad guy. I think there's a lot for them to potentially be able to develop with him.
Yeah, I'm intrigued too. They got a couple of guys. Garrett Prince has been on the practice squad before, so they've got some guys that if somebody doesn't clear waivers, they've got some possibilities. I'm going to be doing my first roster projection this week, Nick. I'm on the fence on that fourth one. I'm with you as far as the first 3. Irv Smith is going to be the tough one. Those last, how many spots you keep on offense at the running back, tight end, and wide receiver spots are all going to impact each other, and they're tough decisions. That's all I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. Birds, wildlife, and nature videos. I love it. Any opinions on Hunter Renfrow? Assuming he's still free. He's still free, Nick. I'm quite surprised that Hunter Renfrow is still free. I figured somebody would have signed him by now, but I just don't see it fit in Kansas City. Do you?
At this point, I just don't think the Chiefs are going to be adding any wide receivers unless there was an injury. So, I mean, once you brought back McCole Hardman, I feel like that was kind of the that was kind of the door closing on receiver unless there was an injury. Because, I mean, at this point, all those guys have been in the system for the most part for, a couple years, including Justin Ross, So, I mean, like from that perspective, I'll give you the wide receiver list again just to kind of do this. Right now, mentally, I have obviously Hollywood Brown as the one. Rice is, in terms of order, Hollywood Brown I got as 1, Rice I got as 2, 3 I got as Worthy, 4 Watson. At that point, I think those are the 4 locks. Then I feel like McCole Hardman is going to give himself the fifth spot, just because he can kind of fill in for Worthy or Brown and also understands the offensive scheme and can work over the middle. Then the 6th spot is where I think it's going to get interesting, to where it's going to come down to what Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, Nico Remigio, and Justin Ross can all do, and what type of training camp they have, and if they can all stay healthy. I feel like those 4, for the most part, are honestly kind of battling for that 6th spot. Somebody like Powell, I think, is going to be on the practice squad again for what is 4th, 5th, 6th year. I don't know anymore, but I think he's just got a permanent spot on the practice squad personally. And then I think anybody else they're trying to develop after that. And so, I mean, we'll see what Washington can do, and any of the other guys, or, and Brooks, what he can do once they get into evaluation period with camp and preseason. But I feel like that's kind of where I see it from the OTAs and mini camp right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty much got the exact same stacking as you do as those wide receivers, and I'm the same philosophy. I mean, it's top 4. You've got that group, and I'm pretty much in the same order as you are. I mean, I think Nico Remigio is putting himself as close to possible being the top of that group right now. McCole and Sky are probably in that conversation. Where Kadarius fits in, Justin Ross. I mean, I think Montrell Washington's going to be putting himself into the conversation. I mean, there's a lot of guys who could make the team. I mean, I think there's 5 or 6 players up for maybe 2 or 3 spots and at the wide receiver spot. So that's why I don't see any place for Hunter Renfrow. I mean, I'm not sure that the spot really exists, and I'm not sure the need really exists. So, and maybe there's a reason why he's still out there. I mean, there could be an injury issue. If it's a pay issue, I don't know. But James wants to know, do you think the Chiefs bring back Jerick McKinnon?
I think right now I saw a guy that lost the zip. Like, McKinnon just didn't look the same last year, and I don't know how long it's going to take him to recover from the surgery and everything. So I didn't see the same running back last year, and he, as Andy mentioned last year about him being a dinosaur in terms of the running back room, like, Andy wasn't saying that by accident. Andy knows what the shelf life of a running back is, and McKinnon had honestly already passed it by being on the roster the past couple years. So would I be stunned if they brought him back? No. But do I think he is the same player that he was 2 years ago? Also, no.
Yeah, I'm generally the same philosophy. And, when you start looking at that running back room, you've got Isaiah, you've got Clyde that are going to make this team. You've got Luis Rees-Zammit, which I think is looking like he's going to make this team if he passes a few more tests in training camp. And then you've got a handful of guys that I think can fill that 4th spot if you're going to have a 4th spot. So I don't necessarily see the big time need. I think they've got the bodies that they want. Like you said, McKinnon, Andy said he was a dinosaur at his age for that position, and he is. So there's a lot of things that I mean, Jerick McKinnon, there is nobody tougher pound for pound than him. I mean, he was that guy. D'Anthony Thomas might have been that one guy at one time, like Dave Tobe would tell you, but the last couple of years, Jerick McKinnon would absolutely be that guy, toughest guy pound for pound. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I mean, I'm just not sure if he still has what he needs, and some of that might just be, the desire to keep playing. I don't know if he's got it or not. I mean, I'm not that's not based on anything I've seen. It's just based on the fact that if I were his age and gone through the challenges that he's had and the surgeries that he had, I'd be thinking twice about it. So, I mean, that guy has sacrificed his body for football for a long, long time. So, if he's done, I tip my hat.
Was he at the ring ceremony? Because I don't remember seeing.
I don't remember seeing him. He could have snuck in. Right, he could have snuck in. So I don't know, but that's a good question. I did not notice him in any of the picks that the Chiefs had, but doesn't mean he wasn't in there. So if somebody sees him, show us in the comments. So that's pretty much.
You can pull up Jimmy's thing there.
The one about Leaf?
Yeah,
there
Leaf.
You go.
And Jimmy spelled it. You spelled it correctly. Good job.
You did. Yes.
Spelled it spot on because dude, like I'll just give you guys a quick little story. Like Leaf is like one of my favorite people on the planet and always will be. And him and Mick were huge. Mick and Dave Stewart were huge mentors to me. So I'm always going to be thankful for each one of those guys and still talk to all of them. Not as much as I did when I worked with Leaf and Dave, but yeah, people would always misspell Leaf's name and spell like an actual leaf, or they'd call him, life Lysick, or or Lyson or something. They would always, just like Mick actually gets called Mitch all the time by people out of town. They'll be like, Mitch Schaefer. It's like, no, it's Mick. But no, I mean, yeah, Jimmy, you did spot on there, so that's funny on that part. Yeah, and Leaf, I don't know if Leaf still does Sports in Your Shorts. I know Chris Goff, who also worked with at Metro. I heard Chris the other day doing it. So I don't know if Leaf. I'll text Leaf and see if he still does it or not. Because him and Golf used to alternate with one another, and so that was, and it's always fun. And a fun little inside note for you, if you listen, Jimmy, just so you know, just kind of a little inside broadcasting thing. Whenever they say the name at the end, that's their cue to let Johnny and them know that they're tossing back to him. Like, and Johnny, our final story, and that's to let him know we're getting ready to toss back to you. So that's how the producer knows. That's how Johnny knows. So whenever you hear him emphasize the name of the person who's hosting that day, that's their cue to let them know.
That is beautiful. And I will echo what you said about Leaf. Leaf is one of the absolute nicest guys in the world. He is one of those give you the shirt off your back kind of guys. Leaf is the absolute best. Luttrell, Nick, have you tried the Wahlburger at Hy-Vee?
Luttrell, I've had it once or twice before. It's not the same as obviously the restaurant itself in Olathe. So, I mean, if I do want to go to Wahlburgers, I'm rarely in Olathe, but the few times I'm there, the last time I had Wahlburgers was when I was at Tyreek Hill's camp. When I was covering his camp about a couple years ago, when it's at the soccer field. It was about 2 years ago, right after he'd gotten traded. I think it's one of the last 2 times I was there, and my niece played in Olathe. She plays football, and so she had a game down there, and I think I stopped by then too, if I remember correctly. So, but those are both been about 2 years ago at this point.
There you go. Well, Nick, we've wrapped it up. We've completed the lightning round, so we got through it all. I want to thank Jimmy's. Thank you very much for the kind words. That's very kind of you. And I'll quote Joe here at the end. Hit the thumbs up. Start hitting the thumbs up button. Like it. Do all those things you do. Hit the bell. All that kind of fun stuff. I always forget what to say. And I'm terrible at self promotion, even though I am a former PR guy, Nick. So
heck,
I'm better at promoting other people than myself.
Well, dude, I totally forgot, man. I totally forgot. This is my apologies.
You got some video for us?
No. Well, yeah, those I can't share that one.
Can't show that one.
Well, no, because like I don't. I mean, technically that's Chiefs property for that one, so we probably can't use that one. The ring stuff they sent to us.
Ooh, there you go, Jimmy.
That one there that can play us out. That's our promo.
There you go. You're not going to leave this time and cut it off, are you?
I totally forgot that once I left, it was gonna burn us. But Matt, what are we doing on the podcast this Sunday for people that are going to want to listen? And we are moving back to Sundays for the next month.
We are. We're going to be back on Sunday, so you will consistently hear us. And I don't remember what we're doing on Sunday.
It's the Chiefs roster, Matt.
That's why I'm doing my.
That's why we're having to both do articles for our fellow websites.
That's why I'm doing my roster projection this week.
Yeah, because you were going to set it up for that and use it to
exactly
with the YouTube tie-in for you.
It's been a long day, Nick. So
I can't share your sentiment because I'm on my off.
See, there you go. That's my excuse for not remembering. So we thank you as always for everybody coming out and joining us tonight. Great questions as always. Great conversation. If you missed anything, especially if you're still around, you had any questions about the stadium, we've talked about that a couple of times throughout. So feel free to go hit that.
Go put Latrell's final comment up there. That's perfect. It's right below Jimmy's.
Lateral from your lips to the ears of the Hy-Vee marketing department, because why they're not sponsoring this show or 41 is the mic is an absolute mystery. It's one of the things that will confuse philosophers for generations to come. I mean, this content was born for Hy-Vee. I mean, you can't get two more Hy-Vee content creators than us, Nick.
Where there's a helpful smile in every Q&A.
That's right. Everybody have a great night, great week, and we will see you on Sunday on 41 is the mic. And until then,
nope, I can't. It's not for this.
It's not for this. I was just going to say, you have anything before I play the video?
No, I'm good. Well,
then we finally have something to take us out on a smooth ending to the show, rather than me staring blankly into the screen and waiting for the stream to end. So, au revoir, everyone.
All things Chiefs, right here. 41 is the mic, a Chiefs podcast on your home of the Chiefs. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts. Also available to watch on KSHB 41's YouTube page.